Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's Meet the Analyst webinar, Connected TV Advertising, Making Sense of a Shifting Landscape. I'm your host, Paul Verna, Principal Analyst at Insider Intelligence, based in New York, and I'm joined by my colleague, Senior Analyst Ross Benish, who's also in New York and actually in our New York City studio today. Hey, Ross.
Hey, Paul, good to be here.
Great to have you. Before we get into the main presentation, I'd like to thank Mountain for making today's webinar possible, and I'd like to welcome Amelia Dieterich, Senior Growth Manager at Mountain. Amelia is joining us from Galesburg, Illinois. Hey, Amelia.
Hey, Paul, thanks for having me.
Happy to have you. A few things before we dive in. We have a lot of information to share, but there's no need for you to take notes if you'd rather not. We'll email you a link to view the slides and the full recording of today's presentation. But we do want you to participate. So just use the chat window on the right of the video feed to submit questions at any time during the presentation. We'll get to as many as we can during the Q&A at the end of the session. So with that, Ross, over to you.
So we have a lot on the agenda today, and I'm going to start out by talking about our CTV definition because this is an explainer webinar, so it makes sense to start there. And there are, several ways that research firms tend to define CTV, but the way we look at it is digitally sold ads appearing on TV sets. So there are several categories that make up this group. The largest one is subscription video services, so all the ads that Hulu and Paramount and Netflix are selling. We also get into the free streaming services like Tubi and Pluto. Device manufacturers who license their operating systems like Roku, Fire TV, Samsung, and LG are also big players in this space. And we include some offshoots of traditional TV. One is virtual MVPDs. They are stuff like Sling TV or YouTube TV, which virtually offer the cable package. We include the 2 minutes per hour that those services sell because that is digitally sold inventory. But if you're watching those services, the rest of the advertising you're seeing is sold by TV networks. And we do not count that here because that's counted in our linear TV forecast. We keep our linear forecast and our CTV forecast separate. So these dollars are mutually exclusive. And another thing that our forecast doesn't include is ads seen on phones or ads seen on computers, anything that isn't a TV set, because we're looking at the device here. OTT would include all of streaming. That would include, stuff like watching Netflix or Hulu on your phone. And we do have a separate estimate for that, but we're looking at today is CTV, the device. And when we compare CTV to television, we see that TV is still about 2/3 of this market. But while that is a lot, its share has diminished quite a bit. When we did this forecast for the first time in 2019, CTV was only 1/10 of the market. Now it's about 1/3. So about $90 billion are going to go toward TV and streaming, about $30 billion to streaming, $60 billion to TV. TV is still quite important, even though it is in a bit of a spiral right now. One of the ways that CTV has grown that investment is by attracting more upfront commitments. So before the pandemic, CTV was accounting for under 1/3 of total upfront spending, and now it's 40%. And the prices that these ads fetch are pretty similar to the top tier inventory that is sold in primetime broadcast. And it's basically filling the void left by TV's declining dollars. So this year's upfront TV, linear TV, the pricing was down, the volume was down, overall spend was down, but CTV gained $2 billion over last year, and that's basically evened out things. And we're only going to expect to see more inventory sold upfront. It's kind of a little strange because upfront selling is an old school tactic that relies on human to human interfacing, and most CTV is sold programmatically. But for securing that finite amount of inventory and that really quality inventory, advertisers are still finding it advantageous to lock it in advance and to get a discount in doing so. We're also seeing the ad dollars spread out in CTV. So a few years ago, Hulu, YouTube, and Roku were over half of the market. Now they're more about a third of the market. And that's happened as a handful of other companies have emerged. So it wasn't long ago, HBO, which is now Max, did not have ads, nor did Netflix and Disney. Now they all have ads, and they will approach $1 billion next year. And you also have the emergence of Peacock and the Paramount networks, which are Paramount Plus and Pluto TV, which are packaged in the upfront deals. Those networks are going to be approaching about $1 billion collectively. And you have more places where advertisers can spread their spend because the audience isn't so heavily concentrated in a few services. Now, YouTube is still the largest CTV player on a gross basis. On a net basis, Hulu is larger. The primary difference there is gross basis is just looking at all the money coming into YouTube. The net basis subtracts the money that it pays out to creative partners who put all the videos on YouTube that you're watching. Those partners tend to get about a 55% cut of the revenue for their videos on YouTube. But with YouTube, the overall business is growing, but the CTV business is growing even faster. Like early pandemic was growing 50% year over year, which is kind of crazy when you consider how large YouTube already is. But even this year, it's still going to grow double digits. YouTube has really invested heavily in its television-like products. It has more viewing happening on the big screen. It has its virtual cable service, YouTube TV. It has invested in the NFL Sunday Ticket, which just kicked off this last weekend. And it accounts for more TV viewing than even Netflix. So this chart here is indexing.
Sorry, Ross, I was going to ask you on the previous slide when you were showing YouTube growth curves. Do you have a sense of how big their CTV ad business is relative to their overall ad business?
So CTV is over 30% of YouTube ad revenue right now. And its share is only growing. By the end of this forecast period in 2025, it'll be closer to 40% of total YouTube ad revenue. So mobile is still very big in YouTube. I don't want to act like it's not, but CTV is where its growth is headed. And so this data here just shows how much more viewing Netflix and YouTube are getting than everyone else. This is from MoffettNathanson. It's indexing all the other services relative to Netflix. So that's why Netflix is at 100% and everyone else is relative to that. But what you're seeing is that Netflix and YouTube have much more viewing than the Disney bundle, almost similar viewing to the Disney bundle plus Amazon Prime. And if you add up all the services aside from Disney ones and Amazon, they don't add up to Netflix or YouTube viewing. We discussed how YouTube is the largest CTV ad player right now, at least on a gross basis. It's number one or two, depending on how you want to dice up the revenue. Netflix is much further behind because they just launched their ad business. They only have about 10 million global viewers on the ad plan, according to the most recent estimates. But given that Netflix's time spent is almost on par with YouTube's, you could see that they have tremendous possibility here to really goose ad revenues. And what's really driving all this investment is just usage. People are spending a lot more time streaming than they used to. If we look at pre-pandemic compared to what we're going to see by the end of next year, time spent with streaming has doubled. This is among the whole population. So this includes, people like my parents who don't stream at all. If you include the whole population, they used to go from about an hour per day to soon it'll be about 2 hours per day. Now, the biggest growth did happen when people were stuck at home. So in 2020, you saw an increase of about 25 minutes per day. You saw an additional increase of about 10 minutes per day in 2021. You're not going to see such drastic increases in following years. You're going to see more like 9 minutes, 8 minutes, 7 minutes. But growth isn't retracting. It's just coming in at a slower rate. But 2 hours per day in 2024 of streaming is pretty significant. And because of that, CTV is really catching up to linear television in terms of time spent. So CTV and linear pre-pandemic, CTV was 2.5 hours behind linear in time spent per day in the general population. And soon it's going to be under an hour. And what you're seeing is that the usage is happening faster than the ad spending is. So people's streaming is replacing their TV viewing faster than ad revenue is going into streaming. And that makes sense for a few reasons. A lot of it is due to the fact that there's just a lot of streaming happening without ads. Like 90% of Netflix viewers still don't have ads. And ad loads are lighter in streaming. In linear TV, you're getting 15 to 17 minutes of ads per hour. In streaming, Hulu's on the high end, and they have about 10 minutes of ads per hour. Peacock is something more like 4, and usually most people are in between there. In the consultancy, Madison and Wall, which is led by Brian Weiser, did some estimates on this, and they saw that the total amount of inventory in CTV and linear that went to streaming is about 23%, but the total viewing is significantly higher at 40%, which just underscores those things I was talking about. And this looks at CTV compared to other devices, other digital devices. So the last slide, we're looking at CTV compared to linear television. Even if we compare CTV to other digital devices, we still see an under-indexing. CTV is 1/4 of time spent with digital media, but it's only 1/10 of the ad spending. And that's, there's just not nearly as many ad-free experiences on mobile and desktop as there are on CTV. And this underscores that subscription revenues are going to be the primary funding source for streaming services. US subscription revenues are like triple what the US ad revenues are, which makes sense when you consider that stuff like Netflix costs $15 per month to have. But ad-supported signups are catching on. So before the pandemic, less than 1/5 of new streaming signups were ad-supported, and now they're closer to 1/3. And that number is just going to inch up. It'll probably go over 40% or near 40% this year, now that Netflix and Disney Plus have advertising, whereas in these years past, they didn't. And on the left chart, we're breaking it down by service. You see there's a wide range in how these signups are distributed. If you're coming in from Netflix, even with them nixing the basic tier, most people are still going for that ad-free option. But like on Peacock and Hulu, you're getting 2/3 of people are opting into the ad plan. And a lot of that's due to the heavy subsidization these services have. They're trying to push people onto the ad plan. They are raising the prices of their ad-free plans so that people are incentivized to adopt advertising because that generates more average revenue per user. I mean, I have Peacock right now. I pay $20 for an entire year of the service. That's a very easy way to get me on the ad tier, because if I was on the ad-free tier, I'd have to pay like $10 a month. That'd be $120. That's a huge price gap. And we also see that most people are already using CTV now, so we're not going to see a big jump in the number of people that are using it. Where the growth is happening in this field is just moderate users becoming heavy users, or light users becoming moderate users. When you reach 2/3 of the population, there's only enough incremental room to add a few million people per year. But what that means for advertisers is you can use CTV for reach now. It isn't just an extension play. But the way that people are watching CTV is kind of all over the place. And the device that people use to access their favorite streaming service has advertising implications because device makers get to sell a portion of inventory. Roku and Fire TV ask for almost 1/3 of the inventory that publishers on their interface. That's for 1/3 of the inventory cut for publishers who work with them. So if 50% are coming in from Roku, advertisers know they have a large base there who they can go and target. And this estimate here does not add to 100% because multiple households will have, a single household will have multiple devices. So it's easy for a person to have a Samsung TV in their living room and a Roku device in their bedroom. And there's a lot of overlap in categories with the smart TV category because Fire TV and Google and Roku all license their own smart TVs. Now, there are trade-offs to each way you purchase inventory. There's many paths to buying CTV inventory, and these are just 3 of the main ones. This isn't even all-encompassing, But with the device manufacturers, like we were just discussing, they help advertisers scale because they have so many publisher partners they work with. Similar to like a programmatic platform, you can put in a buy and go across a dozen apps easily, but you have less control over where those ads run. You can target by genre, but it's harder to get specific placement in a specific show that an advertiser is looking for. If you go straight to the streaming service like Paramount or Max, you can choose which show, or you could choose the top 10 list, or more criteria for your ads to appear in, but you're going to pay a little bit more because that's considered more premium inventory. And you're going to have to strike a deal with each of those if you really want to scale your campaign. But what I should emphasize here is that these aren't mutually exclusive categories. A single campaign from a single advertiser can include inventory from Fire TV, The Trade Desk, and Disney Plus and Peacock. It all depends on what the client wants, how much they're willing to trade specificity and control for reach and scale. Programmatic was one of the methods in that last slide, and that is how most CTV is transacted. It's over 80%. It is just a little bit lower than our digital display programmatic estimate. But the reason it's so high is because we have a very broad estimate of programmatic. Most of this inventory is not RTB. It's not open market. It's happening through programmatic direct, programmatic guaranteed deals. Humans are still doing the negotiation. There's still some manual work, but automation is being used to fulfill the order. But we still count that as programmatic. And keep in mind, we also include YouTube on our estimate. YouTube is over 30% of our CTV programmatic estimate, so that inflates our figures a little bit. And altogether, this $20 billion a year, it's about 1/5 of our US programmatic display ad spending, which is approaching $100 billion a year. Now, these dollars have to come from somewhere. There's only a finite amount of money that advertisers are willing to spend in aggregate. So when CTV grows, it can come at the cost of other channels. Netflix has acknowledged this over the years. When they refused to get into advertising in the past, Reed Hastings would make comments about how Facebook and Google are so successful, and it's hard to break into the ad business due to the juggernauts that are already established. Now that they're selling advertising, they say that they are in the share stealing business, and they are stealing share from linear TV and digital video primarily. So my takeaways from today is just that everything is heading up for CTV. Now, viewers' time spent in ad spending are all growing at various rates, though. They're not increasing exactly the same, but the general trend is up and to the right. But ad spending is going to lag time spent. The time spent is going to grow faster because the ad inventory just isn't like TV. There's a lot of ad-free happening. There's lighter ad loads. So as that viewership happens, advertisers are going to have to get creative about how they replace the TV viewing because CTV doesn't replace inventory at the same rate. Those ad dollars are going to keep spreading out. The three top companies won't account for half of the market, more like a third of the market. And most people are already using CTV. So growth is coming from more usage of existing users and ad loads increasing. You can only expect ad loads to grow in this field. And with that, I kick it over to Paul.
Hey, that was great. Thank you, Ross. So before we get to your questions live, and we've had some really good ones so far, so keep them coming, I would now like to bring back our special guest, Amelia Dieterich, Senior Growth Manager at Mountain. Welcome again, Amelia.
Hello, hello.
So, Amelia, last year, Netflix, which of course prided itself for many years on being ad-free, finally rolled out its own ad-supported offering. And now it seems that almost every major streaming service offers some form of ads. So how has this paradigm shift changed advertiser behavior from your point of view?
It's funny because when Netflix, the ultimate vanguard of CTV and streaming, who's claimed its stake, we differentiate ourselves because we're not running ads. We don't want to do ads, just as Ross mentioned. But when they did decide to do an ad tier, I don't think you could get a stronger sign than CTV advertising is here to stay. I think that this has really signaled what we've been saying all along, that the early days of adoption of CTV are over, which has influenced advertisers' perceptions and investments. So when advertisers are thinking about investing in streaming TV, they really need to evaluate what makes the most sense for them, because there are so many offerings across the Tubies, the Rokus, the Disney Pluses, the Fubos of the world, the Hulus. So they really need to know what they're getting for and what they're buying. And ultimately, from that buying standpoint, advertising teams are also shifting with further investments into streaming TV and putting it an accommodation or an emphasis on CTV. We're starting to see that the walls are coming down between digital and linear and branded performance, where agencies and brand marketers are actually combining teams to be one holistic video team and look at video holistically across the board within their media buys. So it's not just one thing or another. CTV can really fit the mold when we're looking at, the nature of what video is today and what it needs to look like within their video buys. So I think all that said, there should no longer be a hesitancy around CTV. If you're not on CTV today, it's likely that you might be losing traction and your competitors may be getting a little more ground because they're likely going to be investing in CTV. So I would love to hear if the audience is able to enter in the chat and chime in just with a yes or no if they currently are investing in CTV. Would love to kind of see who our CTV investors are.
All right, and we'll do our best to compile those answers on the fly. But Amelia, it seems that we're living in a more ad-friendly world, or one that's at least used to getting ads. How do you think consumers are reacting to this overall rise in ad-supported streaming services?
Yeah, I'll say that I don't think it's a coincidence that ad-supported CTV is on the rise. It's because there's an agreement. A viewer gets an endless supply of amazing on-demand content. One can watch as many Golden Girl episodes as to their heart's desire, or watch, the latest, hottest new show that's coming out for less or no money at all, with the increase of free video on-demand services as well. So in return, these viewers are agreeing to ads. So I think it's a win-win-win scenario. And again, the funny thing is that you hear people gripe about advertising, but the reality is that when polled, people time and time again are showing that they don't just tolerate ads, they actually even embrace them. But that's when you're going to, again, give them something in return. So I recently came across a few studies that showed that 73% of consumers actually prefer ad-supported CTV viewing, and that 60% of streamers give a higher enjoyment rating to shows with customized ads. So there's the catch. I think it's our job to make advertising relevant to the consumer. They're taking, they're inviting you into their home. So I think from an advertiser's or marketer's perspective, we're already reaching people who have raised their hand saying, I'm okay with ads. So I think it's our job to then show them targeted, relevant ads. So again, for the marketers tuning in, I think that it's imperative to work with a platform or publisher who has the capability to optimize delivery of your ads towards relevant audiences and make the most of their precious time and your money spent.
Props to the Golden Girls. So besides this influx of advertising opportunities, in what other ways has the CTV space evolved in recent years?
Yeah, great question. At its core, CTV is ultimately a digital ad platform, right? It's never going to stop growing and evolving to meet customer and viewer expectations and demands. So it's only going to get increasingly more advanced. I think, simply put, it's not the same channel it was when it launched, even when Ross was showing, pre-pandemic levels. People are coming to CTV not only as an extension play, but as a true reach play. And furthermore, it can be a performance play. Still today, a lot of marketers may think of CTV as an awareness or upper funnel position, which is still true. However, with the technological capabilities and advancements that have developed in recent years, it's brought us that much closer to being a performance channel than ever before. I mean, when you look at affinity-based targeting, interest-based targeting, audience segment reporting, where you're actually able to analyze performance at the individual segment level, and lets you discover who your most valuable audiences are. And then also incrementality reporting, you can even go further and and reach people who may not have ever engaged with your brand before, but have shown strong interests in the products that you offer, or maybe your competitors offer. So I think that the capabilities are only going to continue to grow. And then not just on the tech side, but also we have to think about creative. There is a differentiator in creative against traditional TV than also in connected TV. And I come across some partners saying, oh, well, we don't have the right creative to invest in CTV right now. We have to hold out. Not having creative isn't a barrier anymore. We're really looking at ways to, well, at Mountain, we're looking at ways to actually help our partners develop creative through what we call creative as a subscription. And it allows our brand partners to get custom made, high performing creative at no additional cost. When you look at investing, I think it's really important to kind of have the right creative that is right for the placement and the platform.
So just a quick update on our informal survey. Our studio team is reporting that there is an overwhelming number of yeses and a few nos. So I think that's what most of us would have liked to hear and probably expected. So Amelia, I have another question here. With so many new players in the CTV ad space, what are some strategies to boost ad buy effectiveness?
I think it ultimately comes down to what the brand's desired goal is. Advertisers, as Ross showed, have several different ways to buy CTV ad inventory, whether it's through the service directly on a programmatic basis, through CTV device makers, or even a performance-based platform. I think a lot of people want to stay in tune and make sure that they are receiving high quality premium content. So I think that that is of the utmost importance, making sure you're avoiding fraud and running within, again, premium studio produced streaming quality content. But furthermore, I think you need to make sure that your ad falls into that play where it is going to maintain relevancy to the targeted audience. So I think it's crucial to find a technological solution that helps you achieve the goals that you're looking for, and make sure that you have the transparency that you need to make sure that you're getting the results you want from your ad buys.
Okay, so the last question before we move on to the live audience Q&A. Let's say a brand is either new to CTV advertising or looking to commit more of their budget. What kind of tactics can they use to maximize the channel as quickly as possible? Yeah,
I mean, some platforms like a Mountain can get you up and running within a number of days. I think you need to really evaluate and understand that CTV is not a new ad platform anymore. I think it's safe to say that it's been tried and true. And I also think it's imperative to think strategically and map out a strategy. What are you going to use your CTV buy for? Who's your target audience? What performance metrics are you, or goals are you looking to establish? And how will you measure success? I'd also start thinking creatively and making sure that you have the right creative for CTV to transition into that platform. So again, I think it's important to look at the tactics and evaluate across a total omni-channel strategy, because when running on CTV, you are going to have that halo effect as well. And what we've seen with our reporting at Mountain is that when you're running a CTV campaign, you'll actually increase your social engagement with 22% higher conversion and 9% better conversion with paid search as well. So ultimately, as they say, with rising tides raise all ships. So CTV is just that.
Well, thank you, Amelia. And now it's time to get into our audience Q&A. So we received a lot of great questions, and I will start with this one. And this one is for you, Ross. Do you anticipate linear/cable/broadcast rebounding, or is this trend inevitably marching toward those channels becoming more and more irrelevant?
I'd say it's inevitably marching toward those channels becoming more irrelevant and toward the spend declining in those areas. Now, they still have some purpose to the companies that own them, because most of the content, or at least a lot of the content on them, is repurposed for the affiliated streaming service. Like, you're getting a lot of NBC content on Peacock and a lot of ABC content on Hulu. But I don't see broadcast ad spending or viewership declining. Even if we look at older demographics, like boomers' time spent with linear television is declining It's not just millennials and Gen Z.
Another one for you, Ross. Are the low ad loads that we're seeing, especially in some of the newer premium services, do you think they're sustainable?
They're going to probably only increase. That's been a trend with streaming advertising, really a trend with any digital advertising, that once advertising is introduced, it only grows. Hulu started with many fewer minutes of ads per hour than it has right now. I don't expect HBO, or I guess it's called Max now, or Peacock to stay so low. It's good for now, though, as they build out their ad businesses. Netflix will probably eventually raise ad loads too.
Amelia, this one is for you. So TV has always been difficult to track outcomes. And how is CTV different, especially when people are watching on a TV and not on, say, a desktop or a phone?
You're right. CTV or TV in general has always struggled with attribution. I think with so many devices in the mix, it can be difficult to measure ad performance. As we know, majority of CTV ads are not going to be clickable. So I think it is important to always look and have measurement and attribution solutions with your brand. So you need to partner with publishers or platforms that offer clean performance-based attribution. So that goes beyond just the CTV delivery. We need to look at what your visit rates are once the CTV commercial has been exposed and so forth. So again, that's where it comes to a full omni-channel strategy when evaluating CTV success.
Ross, at the risk of putting you on the spot, do you happen to know the latest stats on cord cutting and how skinny bundles affect cord cutting?
Well, so skinny bundles do affect it significantly, but if you look at the traditional way of defining cord cutting, so people who pay for satellite and cable versus those who don't, we see that the pay TV subscribers were outnumbered by those who don't, cord cutters and cord nevers, beginning last year. And that gap is going to just keep growing starting this year. So fewer people pay for linear TV than those who don't. However, the skinny bundles or vMVPDs or linear OTT, whatever you want to call them, they are pretty significant now. It's about 15 million US households. And they're basically receiving the same programming and paying similar price as those on traditional cable. So if you take those 15 million and you put them in the pay TV category, under that rubric, pay TV subscribers still outnumber people who don't, but the gap is still closing. So the vMVPDs aren't replacing most cord cutters. And by like probably 2026 or 2027, you're going to see those lines cross, even if you include the vMVPDs. But that's 4 years later than it's happening without them.
Yeah, and I think ultimately that gets to how you define pay TV, which I know is a topic we have been debating for many years and will continue to do so. But that's for another day. Another question for you, Ross. Why are streaming services pushing people off of their ad-free tiers?
Well, it's just more lucrative. If you look at the average revenue per user for an ad plan and a non-ad plan, the revenue is higher for an ad plan. And that's true across Hulu and Peacock. Netflix has indicated in its early days of advertising that's already true for them. So they're trying to nudge people toward those plans without, irritating so much that they churn off the service completely together. But that's why you're seeing so many price increases across the board for all streaming services, and why Netflix and others are doing things like eliminating their cheapest ad-free tier. They want to get people on the more financially lucrative ad-supported tier.
Just anecdotally, I recently switched from one unnamed vMVPD to another unnamed one. And I did it because of content, not because of price. But I was happy that the price was quite a bit lower on the one I switched to, until I got an email 2 days later saying they'd raised the prices. So this is a thing for sure. Amelia, I'm going to send this one to you, and Ross, you might have some thoughts on it as well afterwards. What will the face of ad measurement look like in the next year? And what methods do you think will be most effective for advertisers looking to justify their budgets and prove ROI?
I think that's something that advertisers and marketers are asking for a lot with CTV is transparency, being able to see exactly where their ads are running, what their ROI is becoming when they are running on CTV. So I think the big story here is going to be how we look to revolve around performance, particularly with incrementality reporting. As Ross previously mentioned, that CTV is often used to look as an extension piece, but now it can be, again, a full reach and performance play. So I think making sure that you have the capabilities to measure incrementality and see what your ROI would have looked like without it and what it looks like within it. Again, because it's going to draw in those pieces of pure incrementality as it is, but also, again, that halo effect that is also going to drive up your search, social, and other performance channels as well.
Ross, anything to add there? And if not, I've got plenty of other questions for you.
I just don't expect streaming to coalesce around a single currency like TV did for decades. It's just going to be more bifurcated.
Okay, so another question, this one gets to very, very current events, Ross. What about the Disney charter carriage dispute and resolution? Any perspective you can share?
Oh, yeah, that is very current. That happened yesterday morning. Well, we'll say Monday Night Football has a way of bringing people together. Neither party wanted to have wanted to be blacked out while two New York teams were playing, and Charter is the New York cable company. These companies are really fighting for leverage of the future. The cable company Charter was wanting to be able to bundle Disney's streaming subscriptions to its customers. Disney didn't want that. Disney was pushing for rate increases. And it seems like they both got a little bit of what they wanted, but they irritated their customers along the way. And it's tough that that's all happening during a writer's strike. So there's a lot of frustration right now with how to fund the future of entertainment, whether that's sports rights, actors, or writers.
Yeah, and just to throw my 2 cents in, because I've been covering this as well and did a couple of media interviews about it yesterday. So I had originally said that this was sort of like a proxy battle for the future of pay TV, which, maybe was a little on the hyperbolic side. And one of the reporters came back to me yesterday saying, well, this whole thing just evaporated. So, what about your comment from the other day? And I'm really sticking to my guns on that, because I think even though it was resolved, there are going to be more of these battles in the future. And all of the questions this one raised about business models, both on the content side and the distribution side, are still very much alive. But
look what's happening with Diamond, all the regional sports networks that are in bankruptcy. There's a huge mess, but that's 15-minute bird walk from here.
Yes. So this will have to be the last question. And it is for you, Amelia. What sources do you recommend for learning how brands that use CTV are staying in the loop on advancements?
Yeah, I think industry publications and entertainment trades are a great first stop. Obviously, eMarketer and attending webinars like this, just to make sure you have the insights needed to make strong decisions. One other thing I think that people tend to overlook is just entertainment trades as a whole. I mean, with the writer's strike going on, with the way that Disney Plus just announced that with their content, they're getting more older generational subscriptions than ever before. So just keeping tabs on what's going on across the industry as a whole. One thing I'm happy to also kind of announce and say is that when you're and partners, you also want to make sure that they're sharing research with you as well. At Mountain, we have a whole page dedicated to research that is not non-biased. It's not selling anything. It is just purely come and look and educate yourself and learn what's going on within the space. So taking advantage of everything that's available.
Well, of course, we're all about research and sharing knowledge. And unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks again to Ross for joining us, and a very special thanks to Amelia and to the team at Mountain. Our Studio II crew, the eMarketer production team, also deserves a huge thank you for making this webinar possible and for navigating the technical difficulties we had today. As promised, we'll be emailing you a link to today's slides, along with a full recording of the session. So keep an eye on your inbox for that. Before we wrap up, let me just take a moment to tell you what's happening across eMarketer's media channels. You can register for upcoming live analyst and tech talk webinars at eMarketer.com/webinars. On the audio side, don't forget to tune in to Behind the Numbers, eMarketer's daily podcast, which you can find anywhere you listen to podcasts. And finally, please check out our newsletters. We have a couple of options across retail, finance, and digital advertising, so there's something for everyone. If you haven't already signed up, you can do so at eMarketer.com/newsletters. Thank you again for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of your workday.